James absent-mindedly swiped through Tinder profiles. Another Friday night, another string of faces blurring together. Then, Sarah's profile popped up. Her smile was warm, her eyes sparkled with intelligence, and her bio mentioned she was a bookworm. Intrigued, James swiped right. It was a match. He sent her a message trying to be clever but not cheesy. To his surprise, she responded almost immediately. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, filled with witty banter and shared interests. They talked about their favorite books, their dreams, their fears. For the first time in a long time, James felt a flicker of excitement. This wasn't just another match. There was something different about Sarah. They exchanged numbers, and soon they were texting constantly. James learned that Sarah was a single mom to a 5-year-old daughter. He admired her strength and resilience. He knew he had to meet her. The Italian restaurant was buzzing with the chatter of diners and the clinking of glasses. James arrived early, feeling a knot of anticipation in his stomach. When she walked in, his breath hitched. She was even more stunning in person. Sarah was wearing a simple yet elegant black dress that accentuated her curves. Her hair cascaded down her shoulders in soft waves, and her eyes sparkled brighter than the candle on their table. She greeted him with a warm smile that lit up her face. As they talked, James felt an undeniable chemistry between them. They talked for hours, losing themselves in each other's company. They laughed over shared stories, debated their favorite movie endings, and discovered a mutual love for classic rock. As the evening drew to a close, James felt a pang of disappointment. He didn't want the date to end. Under the soft glow of the streetlights, he leaned in and kissed her. James and Sarah's relationship blossomed over the next few weeks. They went on dates to the park, the zoo, and cozy cafes. James found himself falling for Sarah more with each passing day. He admired her strength, her compassion, and her unwavering love for her daughter, Ellie. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Sarah invited James to join her and Ellie at the park. He was both excited and nervous. He wanted Ellie to like him, but he also didn't want to overstep his boundaries. Ellie was a whirlwind of energy, her laughter echoing through the playground. She had Sarah's bright smile and infectious energy. James watched as Sarah pushed Ellie on the swings, her face filled with love. He knew right then that he was falling for both of them. Ellie warmed up to James quickly, her initial shyness melting away as they played. As the sun began to set, they walked hand in hand back to Sarah's car, Ellie chattering excitedly about their day. James felt a surge of affection for the little girl. Just as James started to imagine a future with Sarah and Ellie, a shadow fell over their newfound happiness. Greg, Sarah's ex-husband and Ellie's father, reappeared in their lives. It started with a phone call, Greg's voice gruff and demanding as he questioned Sarah about James. The tension was palpable. James tried to be understanding, reminding himself that Sarah and Greg shared a child and a past, but he couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that settled in the pit of his stomach. One evening, while James and Sarah were having dinner at her place, Greg showed up unannounced. He barged into the apartment, his face contorted with anger. He accused Sarah of prioritizing her new relationship over their daughter, his words laced with jealousy and resentment. The confrontation left James feeling shaken and unsure. The weeks that followed Greg's outburst were strained. The easy flow of James and Sarah's relationship hit a snag. Every plan had to be cleared with Greg. Every conversation was punctuated by the unspoken tension of his disapproval. James tried to be understanding, reminding himself that Sarah was doing her best to navigate a difficult situation. He found himself walking on eggshells, unsure of his place in Sarah and Ellie's lives. He cherished the moments he spent with Ellie, reading her bedtime stories and building pillow forts in the living room. But these moments were often overshadowed by Greg's looming presence, his disapproval hanging in the air like a dark cloud. The joy they had found in each other's company was slowly being eroded by the constant stress and uncertainty. James found himself questioning whether he had the emotional bandwidth to handle the complexities of Sarah's situation. Weekends were the hardest. Ellie would go to Greg's, leaving a void in Sarah's small apartment and an even larger one in James's heart. Sarah would retreat into herself during these weekends, her usual vibrancy dimmed by a sadness that tugged at James's heartstrings. He would try to distract her, suggesting movies, walks in the park, anything to chase away the melancholy that clung to her like a shroud. Sometimes it worked, and they would share stolen moments of laughter and connection, their worries momentarily forgotten. But more often than not, the weight of their situation would settle back in, a heavy silence falling between them. He hated seeing her like this, trapped in the crossfire of her past and present. He wanted to be her escape, her refuge, but he was starting to realize that he couldn't fix this. James tried to be understanding. He knew that Sarah and Greg shared a history, a bond forged in parenthood, but he couldn't help the jealousy that gnawed at him, a venomous serpent coiling in the pit of his stomach. Every phone call from Greg, every mention of his name, felt like a punch to the gut. He hated how Greg's presence loomed over their relationship, a constant reminder of Sarah's past. He hated the way Sarah's face would cloud over at the mention of his name, the way her shoulders would slump with the weight of their shared history. He knew that jealousy was a destructive force, one that could poison even the strongest of relationships. He loved Sarah, but he wasn't sure if love was enough to overcome the shadow of her past. The tension finally snapped during Ellie's birthday party. James had spent weeks planning the perfect celebration, wanting to create happy memories for Ellie and to show Sarah how much he cared. The party started well enough. Ellie was ecstatic with her gifts, her face aglow with happiness. Sarah seemed relaxed, her smile genuine as she watched her daughter unwrap her presents. James felt a surge of hope, a flicker of belief that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. But the illusion of normalcy shattered when Greg arrived. He was late, as usual, and his mood was sour. He scowled at James, his disapproval evident in the way he barely acknowledged his presence. The festive atmosphere evaporated, replaced by a thick tension that hung in the air like a bad omen. The aftermath of Ellie's birthday party was like a bomb going off, leaving behind a wreckage of hurt feelings and broken promises. Sarah, caught in the crossfire of her past and present, seemed to crumble under the pressure. James watched, his heart aching, as she retreated further into herself, her usual vibrancy replaced by a weariness that spoke volumes. He tried to reach her, to offer comfort and support, but the wall she had erected around herself seemed insurmountable. He knew she was hurting, torn between her love for her daughter and her desire for a fresh start. He loved Sarah, he truly did, but he was starting to realize that love wasn't always enough. Sometimes, he thought, letting go was the greatest act of love. It meant accepting that some relationships, no matter how deeply felt, were not meant to be. The decision to end things with Sarah was the hardest one James had ever made. It felt like tearing his own heart out, but he knew deep down that it was the right thing to do. He couldn't keep hurting Sarah, couldn't keep subjecting himself to the constant turmoil and uncertainty that had become their new normal. He met with Sarah one last time, at their usual cafe, the one with the mismatched furniture and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. He told her everything he felt, his voice thick with emotion. He spoke of his love for her, his admiration for her strength, his heartbreak at the realization that their paths were diverging. Sarah listened quietly, her eyes filled with a sadness that mirrored his own. When he was finished, she reached across the table, her hand covering his. They said goodbye that day, a bittersweet ending to a love story that had burned brightly but ultimately flickered out. James walked away with a heavy heart, the weight of their shared memories both a comfort and a burden.